Broadcasting from our subterranean studios in beautiful Paradise Valley, Pennsylvania, it's Business and Brain Tumor Talk, a unique show with topics to educate, inspire, and implement. Without further ado, here's your host, Rick Franzo.
And good day, everyone, and welcome to Business and Brain Tumor Talk. What a thrill this is for me. I haven't seen Wendy in forever. We've spoken many times, but I have the privilege, the enormous privilege to introduce Wendy Santana to you. Brain cancer survivor, works now for the American Brain Tumor Association, or the ABTA, and is a blogger and just a force to be reckoned with in the brain tumor community with Second Chance to Live. Welcome, Wendy.
Thank you. So good to be here, Rick. So good to see you again.
Yes, absolutely. We were speaking before the show about when we first connected, and it was through Brain Tumor Talk, a group on Facebook that I founded, and you needed some help after your surgery. You were asked to speak, and so you wanted to bounce a couple of things off and to kind of do some dry runs, and that was on Skype, I think, right?
I don't remember, but it was a few years. I think I interviewed you for my blog first because I read your book. It was one of the first books I read. The How Horseshoes Saved My Life.
Saved my life, yes.
And I was so inspired. I reached out to you after that. And then as I was trying to find my place in the world, because I lost all my identity and everything after my craniotomy, I started my blog and I reached out to you to see if I could interview you. You were the first author interview that I did.
Oh, I didn't know that. Thank you. That's awesome. I didn't know that.
Yes. And then you actually, I think it was in 2018 when I had the opportunity to tell my story in front of a live audience for KPCC Unheard LA. When I posted about it, and then you reached out to me and offered that I could practice with you. And that meant so much to me because my voice was still very halted. I had to relearn how to speak and everything. So you doing that just kind of gave me the confidence that I needed to go on stage and do my thing. And also, I don't know if you recall, but because I was still having a lot of issues with my right side. So I was a little bit afraid that my right side, I used to say my right side had a mind of its own. I was afraid that it was going to go up and do its own thing, or that I would have a seizure in the middle of doing my presentation. I didn't have that much control. So you kind of put my mind at ease about all of that. And it meant the world to me. I really appreciated it. And that was a big turning point in my recovery too.
We got to be here for each other. And your memory is much better than mine. You pretty much nailed it. My dates were all over the place. So, that was, but I do remember the practicing and everything. And it was just such a pleasure to see, your progress and where you were then and where you are today. And, brain cancer survivor, it's that's a red badge of courage or a badge of honor, however you would like to say it. Scars just kind of prove that we survived whatever tried to kill us. And we're very fortunate for sure, you and I. And so if you wouldn't mind, Wendy, tell our audience a little bit about, your backstory with your family, your husband, your wonderful husband and son, and, how you found that you had the brain cancer, and I'll let you take it from there.
Okay, well, so I was a workaholic prior to the discovery of my brain tumor cancer. And I made it, I made it pretty far in my field as a development fundraising professional. I was actually the executive director of a small nonprofit here in Long Beach prior to the discovery of my my malignant brain tumor. So I was lying in bed with my son one night because that was our quality time together, sadly. He was only 8 at the time, and he used to wait up for me to get home. And we were lying in his bed together, and all of a sudden I froze in a fetal position, which I later learned was a grand mal seizure. I could think, but I couldn't move or speak. And I thought I was going to die that night. So I remember thinking, please God, not here, not now, not like this, not in my son's bed, because I was thinking how that would ruin the rest of his life. He would probably blame himself. I had no idea what was going on. I was in and out of consciousness, but I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. And then apparently when my son knew that something was wrong, he called out to my husband, who thought that my son was just playing around. He was like, what, go to sleep. And then at some point the ambulance was called. They came in. I don't remember that. I guess I threw up all over my son's room. And so when we got to the local hospital, I remember pushing out the word stroke because it took everything I had to get that word out. And I just assumed that was what was happening. So they did do a CAT scan, and then they saw something, and then they did a few MRIs, and then they transferred me to a larger hospital. And then we were informed that there was a mass in my brain, and they thought it was malignant. And then I had a biopsy a few days later, and then we were told one night what it was, and they wanted to do surgery the next day. But and of course, I was elated because I didn't die in my son's bed. So at that point, everything was like, even hearing that I had a brain tumor, I think I was still kind of out of it, but it didn't fully hit me, the impact of what was going on. I was just so thankful I didn't die in my son's bed. And it was like, okay, let's move on. Let's get this thing out of my head. I didn't know.
Right.
And so I could get back to work.
That was the catalyst. You were workaholics. You were like, I could appreciate that I'm here, but I really don't have time for this. And so
Right.
If we can get a move on, that would be spectacular.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I know.
My husband, though, he was very strong. He was like, they wanted to operate the next day, and he said no. He wanted to get a second opinion. And I was kind of irritated because I just wanted to get it done and over with. And I really, truly wasn't processing everything that I needed to. And the impact of what was happening just wasn't fully integrated, even though I was still kind of in shock, I guess you could say, and coming down off of having that grand mal seizure. And I was having a lot of additional seizures at the time. It just wasn't clicking on the seriousness of what was happening. I just wanted to get it out.
Yeah.
And so fortunately, my husband took me to a couple of places, but we ended up at UCLA, where they did a lot more testing, because it turned out that the tumor was the size of a golf ball, which doesn't compare to the size of a cheeseburger.
We're not here to, it's not the size so much, okay? 'Cause mine was the size of a cheeseburger, everybody. But, it's location. But it's not a contest, and it's definitely not a contest I want to win. So, your golf ball, big enough, right?
But my neurosurgeon described it as the size of a golf ball, but shaped as like a football.
Okay.
Because it was spread over 2 different regions in my left frontal lobe. So it affected my speech and my movement. So it was pretty And that is very large for the type of brain tumor that I had.
And what type of brain tumor was that, Wendy? What was the name of the tumor that you had?
An oligodendroglioma.
I could never pronounce that one. I can pronounce, astrocytomas and, glioblastoma and meningioma, but that's the one that I can. So spectacular pronunciation on that. It's a terrible tumor, but great pronunciation. So, head.
So yeah. And then I, several weeks later, I ended up having my craniotomy, but we had to go back to UCLA several times so they could do a full brain map because it is a delicate area and there could have been permanent damage. My recovery was very long and very slow because I woke up and I couldn't speak and I couldn't move the right side of my body. It turned out that the steroid that I was taking also caused me to be diabetic, but I didn't find out. No one knew because it went undetected during the time that I was getting pre-tested for the craniotomy and the actual craniotomy. So I was having symptoms of it, but I was blaming everything. Like my vision, I was getting worse and worse, and I was lost a bunch of weight, but I thought all of that was a brain tumor. Turned out I had full-blown diabetes by the time of my craniotomy, and because of the steroid, and it was the anesthesiologist who discovered it. And so that added an extra layer of complication because I couldn't speak. I couldn't move the right side of my body. And I had to constantly urinate. If they're coming in and giving me shots in my stomach constantly, and none of this was completely registering with me. I was just miserable.
Yeah. And what year was this as a point of reference?
This was at the end of 2013, December 9th of 2013. And then I was in the hospital for a full month. I was transferred back to my local area for in-hab rehabilitation. And then after that, I went to an external rehabilitation.
Yeah, the outpatient one, yeah.
Yes, which was an all-day program. And at first I was like, how am I going to make it all day? I was really depressed. You can probably relate a lot to this because you went through so much of the same stuff. I literally wanted to quit. I couldn't imagine staying awake all day and doing these things. I still remember as I was learning how to walk, and my physical therapist said, "Now step backwards." It was like, what? Like that blew my mind. Step backwards. And then I have a lot of funny stories from that period as well. Like the time that I tried to we walked down to the beach and because my right side was still extremely stiff, and it was like, sit down on this blanket. And there's a whole story that goes along with that. I don't know whether to get into that at this point.
We should get in. So here's what we're going to do, Wendy, right? So, because I know about those stories, right? Even as it pertains to me, we should do just like one show just on all of our different adventures or misadventures or whatever we want to call them from therapy, because and I can identify with much of what you're saying. And, it was really humbling to find out that for me, and I don't know how you felt about it, that it wasn't really exclusive to me, that so many other people were touched by it. And was that impactful for you as well? I think I know the answer.
Well, at first I did feel like I was alone because I wasn't meeting other brain cancer survivors. Even in my rehabilitation, most of the people there were stroke survivors.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until after I got out and finished with all of that and started reading books to help me understand why I couldn't speak and what was wrong with me. And I came across your book, which was really pivotal. and especially the frankness, the way that you spoke, it was like, okay, he's not sugarcoating this. Because at that point I still was depressed. I was still down, and in the brain tumor support groups that I was in, it was all like positive and not real talk. And at that point, I just wanted real talk. Now I'm all about the positivity, but it took me forever to get here. And I know that when somebody's in that space, you have to let them be in that space.
Amen. I mean, that type of positivity is toxic positivity. More of the rah stuff, and it just doesn't translate. It just doesn't. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, and I'm sure, right? And so that's kind of what it was. So yeah, that, I felt that for sure.
But then once I found your group, which is still my favorite Facebook group out there for people with brain tumors, everything turned around, and slowly but surely I was finding myself. And because I lost all of my confidence after my craniotomy, which you might be able to relate to as well.
Yeah.
I had to figure out what my new place in the world was, and the things that I thought were my biggest strengths were suddenly taken away from me. So I had to figure out, where did I belong? What were my strengths? And that was how I ended up starting my website, Second Chance to Live, with the number 2.
Yeah.
2ND chance and then to live, because I was trying to figure out where I belonged. And one of the things that happened to me when I was going through intensive rehab was, and I know that we said we're going to do a different show for stories, but this is very important to how I got to the space of where I am, is with the diabetes and stuff. I was constantly pushing the button for the nurses, and I couldn't express what I needed. And I was really alone because that's what I wanted. I didn't want anybody to see me like that. And that was my vanity. I didn't realize that I was self-isolating. And except for very few people, I really was self-isolating. And that was before the pandemic, so I had a choice. And so there was one time that a nurse came in and she was like, what is it? And I couldn't express what it was. And then I hit the buzzer again, and it took forever. The nurse didn't come. So I was like, let me just transfer myself to the toilet.
Oh, that sounds like a smart idea.
I was sitting in a wheelchair, and of course, with the physical therapist by my side, it was a no-brainer, but...
Right, it was easy, right?
But since half of my body was still paralyzed, I tried to do it on my own. I fell and hit my head again. And by the time I was discovered, I was taken again for an MRI just to make sure I didn't re-injure myself. And then I woke up and I was strapped down to the hospital bed. That was my lowest point. So I didn't feel seen or heard at that point, which is why I love using my platform, the Second Chance to Live, pages that I've created and what I'm doing to allow other brain tumor survivors and people who've gone through cancer to amplify their voices and help them be seen and celebrated and heard, and also to have a space to memorialize those who are no longer with us. So it really goes back to my lowest point.
You're hitting all the buttons. I mean, this brings back so much. You are just such a phenomenal human being. You're giving, just like in the Brain Tumor Talk, you're giving people a platform a voice and letting them be heard and letting them know they're not alone. And the ones who, have transitioned and they're not with us anymore, and, their pain is over. And, we memorialize them and we remember them and, fondly, and we use them as, kind of a guide of what it is to be courageous. And I love that. Second Chance to Live is phenomenal. If any of our listeners have a chance, and we're going to be sharing the links and everything for sure. But this is something that is, you really have to take a look at it and really get into it. You're gonna feel it. It's not just a read. It's a feel, right? So it's gonna trigger stuff for you, whether you had a brain tumor or brain cancer or not.
And in some ways, I feel like, not in some ways, this is definitely the most important work I've ever done. And when I'm memorializing people, I'm honored to have the chance that their relatives have entrusted me to be able to do that. And of course, the main campaign that I run on my page is called A Face of Strength. And that was all inspired by a young lady from our community named Jennifer Marie, who had an astrocytoma at the time that I was introduced to her. She was looking for a place to share her story. And I didn't really have a way to do that. I was backed up on my on my author interviews, which was something that I would I would read every book and take a lot of notes and take that so seriously. I felt really good about that. And so I did refer her to a few other places, but she was so strong and going through so much. I literally couldn't let it go. So at like 2 a.m, the whole thing hit me. And fortunately, I have the kind of phone where you can, it's a Samsung note where I can write.
Oh, okay.
So there I was at like 2 or 3 a.m. writing all these notes down, A Face of Strength. And Jennifer Marie was the very first person I featured on it. And then sadly, her tumor progressed to a glioblastoma and she passed away a few months later. But I really felt like that I was meant to do that. We were meant to meet each other. She was meant.
Yeah.
I mean, and so now every living person that I create an image for, which I very much enjoy doing, it's like a hobby to me now. I do in her memory, but when people have passed, I use a hashtag, never forget this person or that person, their full name. I feel like it's really the most important work I'm doing. But I did volunteer all of this time since in 2018. I walked my first BT 5K with the ABTA. So that's Breakthrough for Brain Tumor Walk, which I know you spoke at one.
2016 in Manhattan in New York City.
Yeah.
I spoke and I hosted that one. Yes.
Yeah. And so I finally made it to my first brain tumor walk in 2018. And the most exciting part of that was meeting the other survivors for the survivor photo. I was like, you're my people. You're my people. We finally meet each other. And by 2019, I was on the host committee as well. And I was the survivor speaker. All of that was paramount to me, regaining my speech, the neural connections firing up. And even though my speech was still halted, I was very proud to be there and do that. And I stayed with the committee even through the pandemic. And then they highlighted a few of my posts in their Mind Matters, the American Brain Tumor Association. And I still remember when you and your wife were part of the on the national conference. You guys were you you did the patient caregiver panel. My husband and I did one of those for the regional conference. And I wrote about the national conference the first time that it was virtual. And something just told me to write about it. And they loved it. They published it. They being we, now that I work for the American
Right,
Association.
yeah.
But it was a big deal because I was medically disabled or medically retired for 8 years before I went back. And I thought my career was over. What I didn't realize was I was able to tap into all of the strengths that I had in my career, but now I'm even more well-rounded. And I'm serving as the first West Coast regional manager. So I'm overseeing all of the California BT5Ks. So
Amazing. When I saw that, when that happened, I was like, yeah, you go, girl. That is just so amazing. So, it kind of came full circle in a lot of ways that, you had volunteered with the ABTA and you did things on your own, and you still do, but now you are officially, representative for this amazing nonprofit that's based in Chicago, and helps so many people with support and awareness, and raises money for research and things like that. And I talk about the brain tumor facts all the time. How many hundreds of thousands of people each year affected by primary brain tumors, that there is no known cause and there's no effective way to screen, and how it's the number one or number two cancer causing death of children under the age of 20, and all of the facts. But you have the opportunity and the honor of actually being a part of that association, and doing what you love every single day. And so you did have that second chance to live. It's just it's just fantastic. What would you like to say to brain tumor and brain cancer survivors, and even people that are going through maybe a really rough patch in their lives? What would you have? What strategies would you have for them? And I know you and I both, we like to be positive, but there's that toxic positivity, and none of the, well, just keep your head up and everything will work out. No, what's a really good strategy that you found that really is personal to you that you'd like to share?
Well, at one point when I was when I was still depressed, I met a woman in my neighborhood through a cancer support yoga class that we were doing. And she was hosting a meditation class. And she said, okay, I spoke to her about, in my halted voice, about how depressed I was, mostly because I felt like I had lost everything, because I did define myself by the work that I was doing. And now it's funny. Now that I am my work and my work is me, I don't define myself by it anymore, if that makes sense. Anyhow, she told me to say yes to 25 things. I was like, I'm a people pleaser. Why do I need to say yes to 25 things? But I feel like she taught me mindfulness, because I did work on that. And so I was going back to my lowest point. I was like, yes, I can get up on my own and walk to the toilet now. Yes, I can shower standing up on my own. Yes, I would think about, while I was walking, yes to the smells and the sounds, and I would ask myself, what do I see, hear, feel, smell? And I would say yes to all of that. So it helped me to integrate really my lowest point and to come to terms with it. And there was a time when I remember one night when I was at my lowest. It really didn't have to do with my brain tumor as much as stuff in my family, but I was struggling, and I literally thought about how could I end all this, but then I realized I can't do that. I mean, because of my son and my husband and my family and friends. But had I ended it all then, my story wasn't over yet. I didn't know what was right around the corner for me. Not really around the corner. It took a few years to get to this place, but there's so much that has happened since then that had I not given myself the chance to go through it, I wouldn't have made it to this point where I'm like now loving life. Like seriously, like I've always been a people person and a humanitarian. Now I can, because these are all people, you and me, who are going through this. And so I've transferred my love of people to our community mostly, and have found where I belong. I feel like it's my life calling. Really, I had to go through. I had to learn everything the hard way, falling down and picking myself back up every time and time again. But and so my A Face of Strength campaign is positive. People do like reading it, but it's mostly, you'll see a lot there about challenges that people have gone through, and it's showing the strength that is within our community, if that makes sense.
It does.
I don't know if I answered your question, because
you more than answered the question and then some. You have a unique perspective. Your story is not finished being written, and you have the opportunity to help write other stories as well, to tell their story on their behalf, whether they're still here or if they've passed. And what a transformation. You had to be in that place to get to this place. You had to be in the place where you couldn't express what you wanted because of the diabetes and everything else to the nurses. Now, look where you are. You're able to tell not only your story, but, other people's stories as well, for strength, perseverance, and just courage. And that's the one way I would describe you. You're the epitome of courage, and, you are the face of strength, as you say. So this has been wonderful. I loved reconnecting with you, Wendy. And, any parting words for our audience, as we close out this show? And you're going to be back for sure, because we are going to tell rehab stories and everything else. I think that's a phenomenal idea. We're going to make that an hour-long show. We're going to have a bunch of people on, and we're going to have all kinds of crazy stories. I know you do. I know I do. And I know other people do. So that's what we're going to do. But any parting words for our audience, things that they may want to keep in mind?
I think I'm still kind of stuck on that last question. I think for people to just not, let me rephrase that. Take out the word just, to not lose hope, because you never know what breakthroughs are right around the corner. For instance, even though there hasn't been very much movement on the actual research side in the last 50 years, there is movement in terms of things that can affect our quality of life and help with our treatment. So when I was first diagnosed, it was a mixed oligoastrocytoma. They couldn't differentiate. But then a few years later, because of research, it was confirmed as an oligodendroglioma. So we know what kind of therapies will work best on me in the future when it grows back, or if it grows back, because supposedly it always comes back. It always comes back. But as you say, you're a statistic of one, and it hasn't come back yet. It's been almost a decade. So, and I do get regular MRIs and so forth. I have a new diagnosis now of a different kind of cancer, but I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing as long as I can. And that's what I think that's my motto, to do as much good as you can, wherever you can, while you can.
Perfect. Everybody, Wendy Santana, face of strength, the face of courage, the epitome of courage. Thank you so much for your time today and being with us here on Business and Brain Tumor Talk. We're definitely going to do a part 2 of this for sure. Thank you so much, Wendy.
Thank you, Rick.
That's our show for today. And, love to hear your feedback, and we'll see you next time. Stay gold. Thanks.